Here we go. It's time for episode 54 of The Crisis Show here on Google Hangouts and on YouTube. Welcome. My name is Rich Klein. I'm president of Rich Klein Crisis Management and founder and host of The Crisis Show. It's Wednesday, October 9th, 2013. I'm pleased to be joined tonight by my original co-host and co-founder of The Crisis Show from Sierra Madre, California, the crisis management expert known worldwide, Jonathan Bernstein of Bernstein Crisis Management. How are you, Jonathan?
Well, apparently my head has just been inflated somewhat, but otherwise I'm fine, Rich. Thanks.
Well, you're looking good. Good to see you again. It's been a while.
It's the California look, you know. This is you got the East Coast look with the jacket on.
Well, it's getting chilly here, by the way. It's definitely getting chilly.
It's chilly here too. It's like 70.
Rough life. Oh, you Californians. Anyway, so the motivation for our show tonight, folks, is a tragedy. There was a bus crash early today, 2 a.m. Eastern time. A bus that I believe left a Port Authority in New York City, not far from me actually, here because I'm in New York, and it was traveling west to Cleveland along Route 80. And basically, for those of you who don't know the geography, that goes through New Jersey and through Pennsylvania. And the incident happened in about 3 hours into the trip in a rural area of Pennsylvania. What we know is that tragically one person has been killed. Some 45 passengers were taken to area hospitals, maybe a little more. I have to check those numbers. But the reason we're doing the show on this topic tonight, folks, is that once again we are seeing a major company, a big corporation, which is almost 100 years old, by the way, still get a crisis fail. They failed to use social media, first of all, to express condolences or sympathies. Jonathan, I know we've talked about this in our pre-show, but talk to me what your initial reaction was and what your reaction is now. Here we are,
My initial reaction was that if Greyhound operates their buses the way they operate their crisis communications, I never want to ride the buses. I know that first and foremost our thoughts and prayers are with those who've been, certainly with the family of the one known dead victim and the families of those who were injured. But a lot of the way a company comes across, whether they get through situations like this with their reputation tarnished or not, doesn't depend so much as to whether they're driving safely. In fact, coach crashes, bus crashes are unfortunately commonplace, including for Greyhound, who apparently has about 50 of those a year, according to federal authorities who measure such things, and that's routine. But their crisis communications is pretty much back, may as well be 100 years old like the company, because they are ignoring the feelings of all the public that are affected by this by failing to use social media, and so their full story isn't being told, because in social media you can do a fair amount of message control of your own versus traditional media, which of course will pick and choose what it uses. So I'm shocked at the poor level of crisis communications.
Yeah, likewise. And let's just talk about some of those details for our viewers. So you and I talked a little bit earlier today, about 4 or 5 hours ago, and there was still nothing on Twitter at all. The update at this point, Jonathan, is that there are some customer service tweets that have nothing to do with the accident at all. So that's even more troubling, that they're out of sync with what's going on, or they're getting different orders. So there was some basic, I didn't get my ticket, the usual customer service kind of issues, but not one mention. So there is somebody at the controls, if you will, of their Twitter account, but not connecting with their spokesperson or the CEO, Dave Leach, at all, which is really disturbing. Not even an expression of sympathy. Here we are from 2 a.m. Eastern time.
Right.
We're now at 7 p.m. Eastern. Unbelievable. Not even a brief statement, folks.
Well, the real interesting thing there, Rich, and I'm just pulling up to remind myself of the timing on this, but there was actually mention on the somebody wrote to at Greyhound Bus, which is their Twitter handle,
right,
at 11:21 a.m. I believe that's probably Pacific time where I am, so call it 2:20 your time, 12 hours after the crash, and says that there's this crash and that a Greyhound bus spokesperson says 38 passengers have been treated and released from area hospitals. So it's actually mentioned on the Twitter stream for their name, but they don't say anything about it there.
It's somebody else reporting it.
Exactly.
Right. And by the way, as we do in our business, we monitor, what's being said for our clients in these situations, and even the news coverage. What's interesting to me is that a lot of these news stories broke late morning, early afternoon today, Jonathan. And usually we expect, updates. There should have been, by this time, a press briefing with the CEO and maybe even the state troopers. I've been looking for that. Have seen nothing from the Pennsylvania state troopers. Folks, when you're in a crisis like this, the first thing you got to do is get a briefing out as early as possible, and then let the media know that, hey, we're in the middle of an investigation, we're cooperating with the state police, we're looking into the driver's background, whatever the case may be, and we'll give you an update. We'll come back here, or we'll meet here, or we'll meet downtown at a hotel, we'll have another briefing in 2 hours. And that's what you got to do in a crisis. You have to repeatedly update. I haven't seen anything, Jonathan. I'm just so surprised here. And
they should have been ready. I mean, because it's such a predictable crisis in their industry, they should have a crisis communications plan which has, for lack of a better term, canned statements, we call in our industry.
I call them holding statements. Yes, exactly.
Statements for use in the first 12 to 24 hours after a crash, because this is a totally predictable thing. And then they could just turn those holding statements loose with their social media spokespersons and their traditional media spokespersons, all saying the same thing: message of compassion, message of cooperation with authorities, message that we're going to give you an update, and this is what we know now. And it would have been so simple to do, and yet they're not doing it. And, I've got to believe either somebody in their legal department is calling the shots, forgetting that it's the court of public opinion that'll put you out of business quicker than the court of law. Absolutely.
And you and I have talked about this over and over again. And here we are in, 2013, and, you could give a company a little bit of a pass 30 years ago before the Tylenol crisis, because people didn't know how to deal with this stuff. But my gosh, we've had so many case studies of how to do this right, over and over again. In fact, the thing that's shocking to me is that just a month ago, as you know, Greyhound was involved in a crash. I think it was in Cincinnati or near Cincinnati. That's still under investigation. And that was, I think, September 16th. And it's the same spokesperson working for Greyhound. So they seem to be being extremely reactive in a very small way, giving very little details. In fact, one of the latest news stories was they wouldn't give any further comment on the investigation. Well, heck, that's an opportunity to express condolences or say something. Now, it's possible that they did and the reporters didn't get it, but you know what? There's like 90 stories on Google right now, and not one of them had any statement. There's nothing in quotes. The company website has zilch.
Right.
So they didn't even, I get on companies' cases when they just use the website, don't use social media. Well, folks, they're not using anything. I imagine what's happening is the spokesperson is taking calls and responding to questions as they come piecemeal, and not doing a very good job at that. When in fact, her job would be so much easier, as you said, Jonathan, correctly, if they had a holding statement, which is there's no excuse not to, and then to fill in the blanks for a horrible day like today, and get it out. And that would give you cover, it buys you a few hours, and allows you to catch your breath while you're gathering the information.
Right. And ultimately, it is not their job to release the details of the accident. That is the job of law enforcement.
Right.
Well, what they can do is talk about, they can certainly express compassion, they can talk about their safety record, they can talk about what they do to try to prevent accidents from happening, all of which should be reassuring, hopefully. They can talk about, what their record is versus the rest of the industry, assuming that's impressive. So the entities that do this very well in general are a lot of, not all of, the airlines.
Right.
For the same reason, though. They also, and they have crashes a lot less often than buses crash.
Yeah.
But of course, when airlines crash, it's usually a pretty horrendous situation.
Right.
And but they've learned that this is what you have to do, and for that matter, so do major auto companies. When it's a defect found with one of their products, they know what they should be doing about it. So I don't There's some troglodyte-like decisions being made at Greyhound Communications right now, and it may be over the dead bodies of their PR staff, because this is so PR 101 that I can't believe they aren't recommending social media be used.
Just basically, I don't know. I hate to use a horrible, well, sleep at the wheel. Basically, I mean that's the metaphor here. It's just I don't get it. And you make a great point. This is not a new company. This is not a small company. And one of the things I picked up, I don't have it in front of me, but on Wikipedia, this company had a major accident, like 28 fatalities in the 1950s. My gosh, talk about having a case study that you can learn from over the years, and it's just unbelievable. So I guess what we'd expect in a situation like this is, just to reiterate, we would expect initial statement to get out, extensive use of social media. And by the way, folks, we didn't get specific, but Twitter is the place today to get your message out when there's emergency. That's like the news. It's sort of the news outlet, if you will, during emergencies. And Jonathan, I know you've advised clients on this and have seen this when there's natural disasters, earthquakes, fires, and so forth, that this is where people go. But not only where people go, this is where people distribute their content in a crisis. And if you do that, if Greyhound had just put up a simple tweet, and the thing that gets you too is, you set up these social media accounts. If you have it, it's one thing if you don't use it, you don't have it, but they have a Twitter following. They have an account and they put up stuff. But this is what it's used for. This is what it's supposed to be used for. So.
Well, they should have what they should have, and certainly what clients that you and I would have prepared would have, is a page on their website that only goes live when they have an accident. Or even they can even establish a separate blog just for that purpose, that's just for reporting incidents when they happen. Right. And then they would use Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so on, right, to direct people to that page. To the website. And then maybe they make a brief statement of compassion, like, our thoughts are with the victims, and if you'd like the details as we know them, go here. And the here is the link to their webpage. And so they don't have to go into great detail on all the social media outlets, but they can use that to push people to the information. But of course, there's nothing to push them to. And as you know, right before the show, I posted on their Facebook page, I'm curious, why no expressions of sympathy here for victims of today's Greyhound bus crash in Pennsylvania? I'm going to be interested to see if that gets any response, or they ignore it like they ignored the tweets today. I'm guessing they're going to ignore it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did that. I'll be following that tonight as well to see if you get any response. Just tone deaf on there. And like I said, we've talked about this on the show for more than a year now, these kinds of the same issues. And we hope that's why we do the show. We want people to learn from these case studies. But it's just, for a company that's in the transportation business, for a company that's been around almost 100 years, for a company that has an internal spokesman, for a company that has social media, it has to be, even if, and we've talked about this being lawyered up and having the lawyers calling the shots, but even if you have lawyers calling the shots today, a good litigation attorney would understand that an expression of sympathy is not necessarily an admission of guilt or a liability, correct? Quite
different. And I work with counsel all the time, often subcontracted counsel, and the attorneys I work with get it. They understand it. And they also understand there's a lot of ways, frankly, to say no comment without saying no comment. There's a lot of ways to say reassuring things without doing anything to risk your legal position whatsoever. And part of crisis planning is also to make sure that everybody knows who the spokespersons are and who the spokespersons are not in times of a crisis, so that it's very carefully controlled, very carefully channeled. That also reduces legal risk. But you and I have only seen this one individual quoted so far, and then only to the extent the media has used what she said, which has been pretty much useless.
Yeah, and there's the lesson. I thank you for mentioning that, because it reminds me of the importance of a company of any size to have a crisis communications team, and we've talked about this. And it's really, and this is an especially interesting case study, because here you have, as I said, somebody at the keyboard of social media who is disconnected completely from the spokesperson, and they probably work in the same office. I think Greyhound's based in Dallas. I mean, imagine they're in the same office, or the headquarters, And it's just shocking to me that even in the midst of the crisis, I talk about the 3 key timelines in a crisis, Jonathan, as you probably know, before, during, and after. So even if you didn't do your job preparing, if you didn't do your holding statements, if you didn't have a plan, if you didn't have operational procedures, at the very least, once the stuff hits the fan, calls need to be made with each other and say, hey, what do you want to Dave Leach, the CEO? That's what should happen. We need to get something out. We need to, at the very first step, get it on a website, as you said, whether it's a doc site or on the news page. And granted, the website's old, but still, they have a news website. That's what it's used for. News pages of websites are not just used for rah, look at us, we're a great company. They should be used for situations like this, especially if you have no other tools, right?
Right. Well, if in comparison, for example, another name from the startup of the Crisis Show, Melissa Agnes.
Yes. Up in Montreal, for those of you watching.
Good. Well, Melissa and I brought Melissa in as a contractor for a client of ours in the travel business who does a lot of their business. I obviously can't name them because it's confidential, but a lot of their business is operating tour coaches that go to destinations both in North America and around the world. And so they know that a certain, and the plan not only covered traditional media, but it had a whole component that Melissa was responsible for on social media crisis communications. And the method of coordination between the social media people and traditional media people was well established by the plan. And because they run so many coaches, buses, that there's going to be some accidents, there are contingency statements, holding statements in the plan are ready for use. So we know what's going to be said, we know who's going to be saying it, and we know how coordination takes place between the different parties. And this isn't even for a name that's as well known as Greyhound is.
Yeah.
And yet they understood, including their legal counsel, understood that there's an absolute need to have this kind of planning in place, that's 21st century communication. And not 1930s communication, which is more Greyhound stuff.
We'll say 1950s, but yeah, you're right. You're right. I used to work on an afternoon newspaper on a portable typewriter, and I know you have too.
Yeah. Well, I was born in the mid 1950s, so.
Yeah, but at least we've moved on with the times, and there's just no.
I was a geek since before being a geek was cool. So.
Yeah, me too. No, it's just. And the other thing I wanted to mention about this situation, Jonathan, is that we talked about having this team together, a social media team working in sync with the CEO, general counsel, public relations person, public affairs, whatever you want to call it, and also just like you and I did today, we're monitoring what's being said about Greyhound, and that's another important component. So it's not just broadcasting out. You also want to keep a close eye on what's being said about you, especially if you're a spokesperson. You want to be able to dispel the rumors, the inaccuracies. And as you and I know for sure, especially the early hours or first day of a crisis, a lot of false information gets pushed around, particularly because of social media, but also just in trying to report from the scene, radio, TV, print reporters. They're getting conflicted information, different sources. So you have a passenger, you have a hospital spokesperson, you have state police, you have multiple sources, and you got to pull that together. So it's the job of the company to set the record straight to the extent they can.
And in fact, one of the practice scenarios we worked with this travel industry client is we used a scenario of a coach accident with people using their smartphones to communicate from the scene, as well as spokespersons from law enforcement, as well as news helicopters circling overhead. And all that data was coming back to the company's command center.
As it should.
So that they were monitoring in real time. And they, as you say, they were filling in the gaps. They were answering phone calls from, concerned loved ones. Is my cousin, brother, aunt, uncle okay? They were putting out an 800 number that people could call if they thought they had a loved one on that trip. I mean, all of that was built into the process, so they integrated with the real-time situation.
Yeah, it's a great point. I lost my train of thought for a second. But I was going back to the crisis team and monitor. Oh yes, so there was just today to refer back to this. A great example of this was one of I think it was a Pennsylvania reporter who's pretty active on social media. He tweeted out a devastating photo of the incident. So one of the things I want to tell our viewers is that you can't hide the bad information or minimize it if it is bad, because that photo, and we'll put it on our links tomorrow when we do our day after on the show at www.thecrisisshow.com. We'll put up that link. It was a startling photo where you see the bus crashed into the rear of the tractor trailer, and pictures don't lie, video doesn't lie, as we know, and we talk on the show about everyone is a citizen reporter today as well. So at the very least, the company has to at least get it right with the reporters they're in touch with, and then hope that influences the public opinion beyond, right? I mean, that's how I look at it.
Right. I mean, and at the end of the day, beyond the human compassionate reasons, I mean, how many people are going to cancel a Greyhound trip or pick a competing bus line as a result of their communication? What's the bottom line impact on Greyhound? And they're not thinking about that. What if 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people don't travel with them the next month because their fear of Greyhound crashes and all the sensationalism that goes along with reporting? What's that going to cost Greyhound?
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
It's interesting. I think they're one of those examples of a semi-monopoly in the industry, Jonathan. I'm not an expert on the transportation industry, but I don't think there are a lot of bus companies that have the kind. I think they have over 3,000 routes across the United States and Canada. I don't know the exact number, but they're pretty big. And I don't know that. I mean, your point's well taken, but it is in a sort of a monopoly situation, nonetheless. It's just unbelievable so far. I think when we wrap the show, it'll be very interesting to see if anything changes over the next 6 or 7 hours. And again, even at the state trooper level, we've seen this. We all tune into CNN when there's a tragedy like when there's a terrorist attack, Boston Marathon bombing, Newtown. We always see a press briefing with a state police spokesperson, a mayor, a supervisor, a governor, to show that that they're unified in dealing with the situation and expressing condolences and so forth, and letting people know that things are under control. And that hasn't happened yet. And so
remember, Trailways is still around.
Yes, Adirondack. Well, it's Adirondack by me. I guess they are national.
And there's a couple of startups recently. I think there was one called Megabus.
Oh, yeah?
That are trying to take them on, and they're going to go to town on comparing themselves if they can brag a better safety record.
I took the words right out of my mouth as the Meatloaf song goes. Yes, absolutely. A smart market will exploit that for sure. No, I mean, you don't exploit the tragedy of the victims, but certainly you can focus on a safety record here. Not just a one-off, not just a fluke. There's a pattern of irresponsibility, I would say, from what we've seen in terms of communicating it. Okay, so any other thoughts of any other tips we can give to our viewers about using this as a case study? And I would just say that, folks, my quick one is, don't start preparing for a crisis when you're in the middle of it, because even then it's difficult. Take the time with your business, and it doesn't matter how big your business is. It doesn't matter how big your crisis team is. But if you have, a CEO and owner, and you have a spokesperson, whether that's a per diem person or a part-time person or an outside consultant like Jonathan or I, pull a team together once or twice a year and do an audit. Assess where you're vulnerable. I mean, some of them are obvious, certainly in the transportation industry, this one is obvious. And if you're in the nuclear industry, the risk is obvious, as we saw tragically in Fukushima. So, but think about what could affect your industry. Think about what's going on, what's brewing inside your business today, whether it's a brewing lawsuit or so forth. So, Jonathan, chime in on that.
Not just incidents that could, that cause death or destruction, but also situations that could seriously harm your reputation. Absolutely. Which could be lawsuits, could be people protesting, including online protesting, which is an animal all by itself. And actually, it's the small to mid-sized business that can least afford not to plan, because someone is, entity as big as Greyhound may be able to take the hit,
Right.
but small to mid-sized businesses, one nasty wrongly managed crisis could put them out of business.
That's a great point, Jonathan. That's a great point. And I think we'll wrap it there unless you have anything else to add. I just think we've done a good job in summing up the situation. Again, our condolences to the family of the one victim, and certainly we hope that death toll stays where it is at one and the other people do recover and can regroup. But yeah, this will be interesting to watch, and we'll certainly revisit it. If anybody wants to tweet about the show, please use hashtag The Crisis Show, and our website is www.thecrisisshow.com. Jonathan, you can reach Jonathan at Bernstein Crisis on Twitter, and Bernstein Crisis Management, www.bernsteincrisismanagement.com, if I got that right. Right. So check out Jonathan's stuff, and Jonathan, please share with our audience the name of your book and books. You have a few.
Yeah, sure. I've written Manager's Guide to Crisis Management, which is a textbook from McGraw-Hill, and I'm pleased it's being used at a number of universities now. And also Keeping the Wolves at Bay, which is how to deal with the media, including social media, during times of crisis.
Excellent. And you can find Jonathan's and his and Eric Bernstein's blog connected to your website, correct?
Right, both are.
Super. And required reading if you're a crisis manager, somebody who wants to learn more about situations like this. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time, as usual. You're always insightful and educational, not just to our audience, but to me as well. So I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Rich.
And be well. We'll talk soon. Have a good night. Thanks again for watching, everyone. Have a good night.